This final lesson is a lab, it's a practicum, seed projects, Bob, and we're going to take people through the exercise, again, that people all over the world, many have gone through, and God has done really remarkable things. And I thought just to set this up, it would be fun to hear. You could tell so many stories, but let's just hear one story.
Okay. The story that comes to my mind is the story that began maybe 10 years ago. In a vision conference Daryl and I were teaching, there was a young man. I don't even remember him being there, but he says he was there. He was in his late teens, and he'd been sent by his pastor because his pastor couldn't attend. He was a bivocational pastor, and this teenager was unemployed, high school graduate, and he came back to his little tiny church with 13 baptized members, and in a slum, one of the worst slums of Nairobi, called Kagishu, which means the knife, which is what you would get if you went there at night and uninvited. And the pastor asked him, "What did you learn?" He said, "Well, I learned we're not worshiping God the way we're supposed to." And the pastor said, "What kind of heresy have you been exposed to?"
We sent you there, okay. Yeah.
And he said, "Well, explain to me what you mean." And he said, "We learned that the way we worship God in truth is to demonstrate His love." And the pastor said, "Well, I'm up for that. And what do you suggest?" I'm the only employed person in this church, and I'm only partially employed, and none of the rest of you have a job. So what do you propose that we do? And Meshach said, they taught us that we begin by asking God what to do. So pastor said, okay. So he pulled his few elders together, and they got down on their knees, and they said, "God, we want to worship you in truth, not just in spirit. Show us what we can do." And while they were praying, they heard children running around the church who were not in school, though they were school age, but they were not in school because there was no school in the community. And the parents were very poor and had no resources to send their kids to school. So they started a school. It's an incredible story. Now there are 6 schools. 4 churches have been planted that are brand new, that are populated by the students' parents who have been so impressed by the service of love that they've received from this little tiny church that 4 other churches have been started. There's a secondary school. I remember a few years ago I had this young man come to another vision conference to share his story. And after he did, he came to me and he said, "Bob, you taught us how to plant a seed. Now, would you teach me how to manage a forest?" And so I said, "Meshach, I don't have a clue."
I like when he talks about Meshach. I've heard this story about how they started the school the very first day.
Right.
Because didn't they do it in the church? And it was
yeah, it was a tiny little room.
Right.
And there were 4 high school students. They stood in the middle of the room,
These were the
one
teachers.
facing east, one facing west, one north, one south, and they divided the few kids that they had into the 4 different, capacity levels that the kids had. And they taught them that way. And they did that for 8 months with no income. And they even started charging tuition, which was 1 shilling a day. And with that tuition, they bought milk and crackers for the kids. They didn't pay themselves. That's sacrificial service.